I want to start by telling you something I've thought about for a long time. It's not easy to put into words, because it's not just about a simple choice. It's deeper than that. Something that has quietly shaped the way I see the world and myself. When I think about everything I could have held on to, everything I could have reached for, I realized there was only one thing that felt right, only one thing that made sense in the middle of all the noise and confusion of life. And that's why I chose you. I didn't choose you because it was convenient, or because it made sense on paper. I didn't choose you because someone told me to, or because I thought it would make others happy. I chose you because in some quiet, invisible way, you felt like the part of me that I had been searching for all along, something that had been missing without me even noticing it. I can't describe it perfectly, but I know the feeling. You brought calm to my restless mind, even when nothing else in the world seemed certain or stable. And in that uncertainty, that chaos, you became the one thing that felt undeniably true. I think about all the other options I had, the distractions, the excitement, the things that spark curiosity or seem important in the moment. I think about how easy it could have been to follow any of those paths, because they were bright and shiny, promising immediate satisfaction or approval. But none of them called me in the same way. None of them spoke to the quiet corners of my heart, where real meaning grows. There's a difference between something that looks like it could matter, and something that quietly, without fanfare, changes the way you understand yourself. You did that for me. You changed the way I look at the world, and the way I look at myself. You made the impossible feel possible, not by doing anything grand, but simply by existing in the way that only you can. It's strange to admit, but even now, I find it hard to fully explain why I didn't choose anything else. There were so many things screaming for attention, so many paths I could have taken, yet none of them felt like the right home for my heart. Sometimes I think the hardest part of choosing you wasn't what I gained, but what I left behind. I left behind comfort and certainty. I left behind easy excitement and the temporary warmth of things that shine for a moment and then fade. I left behind parts of life that were safe, parts that promised recognition or applause. And I left them behind because deep down I realized that safety and applause would never fill the same space that you did. You were never flashy or loud. You were never obvious or easy. And that's exactly why I chose you. I chose you because I recognized the quiet truth that nothing else could ever match. Because I realized that the loudest voices, the brightest lights, the easiest paths, they all led somewhere temporary. Only you, in your subtle way, led me somewhere lasting, somewhere that felt like it might actually belong to me. I've spent nights thinking about this, lying awake and trying to sort through the reasons, trying to understand myself better. And what I keep returning to is this feeling that when all is said and done, when the noise of life fades and the world quiets, you are the one thing I don't want to lose. You are the memory I carry, even when I can't reach for it. The feeling that lingers when everything else has passed. And that's why I chose you. I chose you because every other choice, no matter how shiny or exciting it seemed at the time, always felt empty compared to you. Even in moments of doubt or fear. Even when life threatened to pull me in different directions. Something inside me would whisper that none of it mattered as much as this. That whisper became louder over time, until I realized it was no longer a choice. It was the only choice I could make without betraying myself. There's a strange beauty in realizing that what matters most isn't always visible. People often talk about choosing things that are big or obvious or dramatic. But the truth is, the things that truly matter are quiet. They don't demand attention. They don't promise recognition. They don't boast about their value. They just exist. And somehow, without explanation, they make all the difference. That's what you are. You exist in a way that fills the spaces other things never reach. You are not a loud joy, but a deep one. Not a passing thrill, but a constant, and choosing you didn't feel like a decision at first. It felt more like remembering something I had always known but had forgotten. Like finding the part of myself that had been waiting for a place to belong. I can't pretend this was simple. Choosing you meant accepting uncertainty. Choosing you meant questioning everything else I thought I wanted and admitting that it was not enough. Choosing you meant embracing vulnerability, because it's impossible to fully care about something this deeply without opening yourself to pain. And yet, even knowing that, even knowing how fragile and unpredictable life can be, I couldn't choose anything else. Every alternative suddenly seemed smaller, quieter, less alive when I compared it to the weight of what you bring. And in that realization, something shifted. I understood that life is not measured by what looks exciting or successful to others, but by the things that touch your soul, that change the way you see the world, that quietly, insistently, insist that you notice them. I often wonder if other people understand what it means to choose something like this, to choose a presence, a feeling, a truth over everything else. To understand that some things are bigger than convenience, bigger than temporary comfort, bigger than the voices that shout and push and promise. It's not about proving anything to anyone. It's not about winning or losing. It's about listening to the part of yourself that knows the difference between noise and meaning. And in listening to that part of myself, I heard you. You were there, quietly, patiently, without needing to justify yourself. And in that quiet, I found the loudest truth of all, that this is the thing that matters. The thing I could not walk away from even if I tried. I don't know if I'll ever be able to fully explain all the ways you've shaped me or all the reasons I chose you. Some of it will always stay inside, unspoken, private, because it is too intimate, too subtle to be captured by words. But I hope that even in this imperfect way, I can give you a glimpse of it. I can tell you that it was not a decision made lightly or casually. I can tell you that every step, every thought, every moment that led me here was filled with reflection, doubt, and recognition. I can tell you that in a world full of distractions, full of things that glitter and fade, full of paths that promise more than they can give, you became my choice, my anchor, my quiet certainty. Even now, I carry this feeling with me like a secret, like a gentle flame that refuses to go out. And when I pause and think about it, I realize that choosing you was never about being right or clever or strong. It was about being honest, about listening to the part of myself that finally understood what truly matters. And that honesty is something I can never take back, something I can never regret. I could have chosen differently. I could have followed what seemed easier or more obvious. But then I would have missed this, the depth, the meaning, the quiet, unwavering truth that I found in you. That's why I chose you. That's why in the middle of everything, I chose the thing that felt like home, even when I didn't fully understand it. And maybe, in the end, that's what life is really about. Not the choices that seem impressive or bold, but the ones that quietly transform us, that touch our hearts and shift our understanding of what matters. You were that choice for me. You were the silent force that made everything else seem smaller and less urgent. You were the memory I carry, the feeling I hold, the truth I cannot deny. And I know without a doubt that I will continue to carry you with me, in every thought, in every quiet moment, in every reflection on who I am and what I truly value. So, if someone asks why I didn't choose anything else, why I didn't take the easier path or follow the brighter lights, I can only say this: I chose you. Not for recognition, not for approval, not for comfort or convenience. I chose you because you spoke to the part of me that nothing else could reach. You became the center in the chaos, the calm in the storm, the truth in the noise. And in choosing you, I finally understood something I had been searching for all my life, that some things are worth more than all else, that some presences are irreplaceable, that some choices are not really choices at all, but realizations. And this realization, this quiet knowing, is why I chose you, and why, even after all the questions and doubts, I would choose you again. This is why, when I reflect on my life, when I think about the paths I could have taken and the doors I could have opened, I don't feel regret. I don't feel doubt. I feel gratitude for the patience, the quiet persistence, the unseen way you made your presence felt. I feel a kind of awe for the simple, undeniable truth that sometimes the most important choice isn't obvious, isn't loud, isn't applauded. It is quiet, it is subtle, it is a whisper in the dark that insists you notice it. And I noticed you. That's why I chose you. And I will carry that choice with me always. As I continue thinking about this choice, I realize how slowly it happened. It was not a sudden moment where everything became clear. It was built over time through small realizations, quiet moments, and long silences where I sat with myself and listened. Life kept offering me many directions, many reasons to change my mind, many chances to turn away. But each time, I noticed something important. No matter where my thoughts went, no matter how far I tried to imagine another path, they always found their way back to you. Not because I forced them to, but because that was where they naturally belonged. You became the place my mind returned to when everything else felt heavy or confusing. And that return was gentle, not demanding. It didn't pressure me or rush me. It simply waited steady and patient until I was ready to understand what it meant. I remember moments when I questioned myself deeply. I asked whether I was holding on to something too tightly, whether I was afraid to let go of the familiar, whether I was mistaking comfort for meaning. Those questions were not easy, and they didn't have quick answers. I sat with them, sometimes for days, sometimes for longer, and every time when I stripped away fear, pride, and outside expectations, I found the same truth sitting quietly underneath it all. You were not something I clung to because I was scared of losing everything else. You were something I chose because losing you felt like losing myself. That realization didn't come with drama or tears. It came with calm, a calm that told me I was finally being honest. There were days when I tried to imagine my life without you, not because I wanted to leave, but because I wanted to test my understanding. I pictured myself moving forward, filling my days with other things, other goals, other distractions. And in those imagined futures, I noticed something painful but clear. Everything worked on the surface, but something inside felt hollow. The days felt busy but empty. The nights felt long without depth. It was like watching a life that functioned but didn't breathe. That was when I understood that you were not just part of my life. You were the meaning that gave life its shape. Without you, everything else lost its color, even if it still looked complete from the outside. I think many people confuse choosing with winning. They think the best choice is the one that looks strongest, safest, or most admired. But this choice was never about winning anything. It was about alignment, about finding the thing that matched the quiet truth of who I am. You never tried to impress me. You never promised me a perfect future or an easy road. You didn't need to. Your value was not in what you offered me, but in how you made me feel when everything else fell away. You made me feel grounded. You made me feel present. You made me feel real. And in a world that often pushes us to pretend, to perform, to chase, that feeling was rare and powerful. There were moments when I felt tempted to walk away, not because you lost meaning, but because meaning can be frightening. It asks something from you. It asks you to slow down, to pay attention, to accept depth instead of speed. And that is not always comfortable. Sometimes it's easier to stay busy than to stay honest. Sometimes it's easier to chase noise than to sit with silence. I felt that pull many times. But each time I leaned toward distraction, I felt myself drifting away from what mattered. And each time I returned to you, even briefly, I felt whole again. That pattern taught me something important. Real meaning does not shout. It waits. As time passed, I noticed how this choice changed the way I moved through the world. I became more careful with my thoughts, more patient with my emotions, less interested in proving anything to anyone. You softened the sharp edges of my mind. You taught me that not everything needs to be explained or defended. Some things are true simply because they feel true. And that feeling does not weaken over time. It deepens. The longer I carried you with me, the clearer everything else became. I stopped chasing things that didn't last. I stopped measuring my worth through comparison. I stopped confusing movement with progress. Choosing you quietly rearranged my priorities, without forcing anything. I also learned that choosing something meaningful does not remove doubt completely. Doubt still visits. Questions still appear. There are days when uncertainty creeps in and tries to make everything feel unstable. But the difference now is that doubt no longer controls me. It passes through, but it does not stay, because underneath the questions, the foundation remains strong. You are not a fragile belief that collapses under pressure. You are a steady presence that holds even when I feel unsure. That stability does not come from certainty about the future. It comes from clarity about the present. And in the present, you continue to feel right. Sometimes I wonder if this choice will ever make sense to others. Maybe it doesn't need to. Maybe some choices are not meant to be understood from the outside. They are felt from within, quietly, personally, without explanation. I no longer feel the need to justify why I chose you. I don't feel the need to compare or defend. The choice stands on its own. It exists because it is real. And that reality does not depend on approval. It only depends on honesty. I chose you because when I listen to myself without fear, without expectation, without noise, you are what remains. There is also a certain peace in knowing that this choice did not come from urgency. It did not come from loneliness or pressure. It came from awareness, from understanding what nourishes me rather than what distracts me, from recognizing the difference between fullness and excitement. You do not fill my life with constant highs. You fill it with depth, and depth is something that grows quietly over time. It does not fade quickly. It does not disappear when circumstances change. It adapts, it remains. That is why I trust this choice. Not because it promises happiness, but because it offers truth. I think back to who I was before I understood this. I was always reaching, always searching, always feeling like something was just out of reach. I mistook that feeling for ambition or desire. But now I see it differently. I was not reaching for more. I was reaching for alignment. And when I finally found it in you, the reaching stopped. Not because I gave up, but because I arrived. That arrival was quiet, almost invisible. But it changed everything. I began to live instead of chase. I began to listen instead of react. I began to value what lasts instead of what impresses. Even now, as I move forward, I don't pretend to know where everything will lead. Life remains uncertain. Paths shift. Plans change. But this choice does not feel threatened by uncertainty. It exists alongside it. It does not demand guarantees. It only asks for presence. And that is something I can give. Every day, in small ways, I choose to stay connected to what matters. I choose to remember why I chose you in the first place. Not because I am afraid of losing you, but because remembering keeps me honest. It keeps me grounded in what is real. There is also a quiet gratitude that comes with this understanding. Gratitude for the patience it took to recognize what truly matters. Gratitude for the mistakes that showed me what doesn't last. Gratitude for the moments of confusion that forced me to slow down and reflect. Without those experiences, I might have missed you entirely. I might have mistaken noise for meaning. But life in its own quiet way led me here. And once I saw clearly, there was no going back. Not because I was trapped, but because I was free. I don't know how this story ends. And I don't need to. Some stories are not meant to be finished. They are meant to be lived one quiet moment at a time. What I do know is this: choosing you was not about escaping life. It was about facing it honestly. It was about acknowledging what gives my life depth, even when that depth feels heavy or complex. It was about accepting that some things matter more than speed, more than recognition, more than comfort. And once I accepted that, the choice became clear. So I continue forward with this understanding, carrying you not as a burden, but as a guide. You remind me to slow down when the world rushes. You remind me to listen when everything is loud. You remind me that meaning does not have to be proven to be real. It only has to be felt. And I feel it every time I return to myself. Every time I sit in silence. Every time I let go of what does not serve me. That is when I know again and again why I chose you. And maybe that is enough. Not certainty. Not promises. Just this quiet knowing that some choices come from the deepest part of us. Choices that do not fade with time, but grow stronger through reflection. Choices that shape us not by force but by truth. You are that choice. And as long as I continue to listen to myself honestly, as long as I remain open to what truly matters, this choice will remain. Not as a rule I follow, but as a truth I live with. As time keeps moving forward, I notice how this choice continues to quietly shape my days. It is not something I think about every moment, but it is something I feel underneath everything I do. Like a steady ground beneath my feet, it holds me even when I am not aware of it. There are moments when life feels ordinary, almost plain, and yet even in those moments, there is a sense of completeness that did not exist before. That completeness does not come from excitement or achievement. It comes from knowing that at the core of my life, something real exists. Something honest. Something chosen with care and awareness. And that knowledge changes how I experience even the simplest moments. I have learned that choosing something meaningful does not mean life becomes easier. In some ways, it becomes more demanding. Meaning asks you to pay attention. It asks you to be present instead of distracted. It asks you to face your own thoughts rather than run from them. There are days when this feels heavy. Days when it would be easier to forget, to drift, to let the world decide everything for me. But even on those days, I remember why I chose you. I remember that avoiding depth only creates emptiness. And emptiness is far more exhausting than honesty. So I stay. I remain connected. I allow myself to feel fully, even when those feelings are not comfortable. There were moments in the past when I believed that choosing meant closing doors forever. I feared that by choosing one thing deeply, I would lose everything else. But now I understand that this choice did not take anything away from me. It clarified what was never meant to stay. It helped me release what was only filling space without adding meaning. Instead of shrinking my life, it made it clearer. Instead of limiting me, it focused me, and that focus gave my energy direction. I stopped scattering myself across things that did not matter. I began to invest myself where it truly counted. I think about how many people spend their lives chasing what looks important, never stopping long enough to ask what feels true. I was close to doing the same. I was busy, always moving, always planning the next step. But movement without direction can quietly drain you. You feel tired without knowing why. Restless without knowing what you need. When I chose you, that restlessness softened. Not because everything was solved, but because I was no longer running from myself. I had chosen to listen. And listening changed everything. Sometimes memories rise unexpectedly. Small moments from the past that remind me how far I have come. Times when I almost ignored this feeling. Times when I doubted it. Times when I thought I needed something louder. Something clearer, something more obvious. Those memories do not bring regret anymore. They bring understanding. I see now that I needed those moments of confusion to recognize clarity when it arrived. I needed to feel lost to understand what it means to feel grounded. And in that grounding, you became unmistakable. I have also learned that choosing you does not mean I will never feel tempted by other paths. Temptation still exists. New ideas still appear. New possibilities still try to pull my attention. But the difference now is that I no longer confuse curiosity with direction. I can explore thoughts without losing my center. I can observe without abandoning what matters. Because deep down I know where I belong. I know what aligns with me. And that knowledge gives me freedom, not restriction. There are quiet evenings when I sit alone with my thoughts. No distractions, no noise. In those moments, I feel closest to the truth of this choice, without the world watching, without expectations, without pressure, just me and my thoughts. And every time, I feel the same calm understanding, that choosing you was not an escape from life, but a deeper entry into it. It allowed me to experience things more fully, to feel emotions more honestly, to live moments more consciously. I am no longer half present, half distracted. I am here. I also realize that this choice has taught me patience. Meaning does not rush. It unfolds slowly. It reveals itself over time. There is no finish line to cross, no final moment of arrival. There is only continued awareness, continued care, continued presence. And that patience has softened me. It has taught me to allow things to grow naturally without forcing outcomes, to trust the process rather than control it. And that trust brings peace. There are days when the world feels heavy, when uncertainty presses in, when the future feels unclear. On those days I do not look for answers far away. I return inward. I return to the reason I chose you, not as a solution but as a reminder that even in uncertainty some truths remain steady. Some values remain unchanged. Some choices do not depend on circumstances. And that steadiness gives me strength, even when nothing else does. I have noticed how this choice has changed my relationship with time. I am less rushed now, less anxious about what comes next. I still plan, I still move forward, but I no longer feel chased by the future. I understand that what matters most cannot be hurried. Depth takes time. Understanding takes time. And I am willing to give it that time. Because I am no longer trying to prove anything. I am simply living in alignment with what feels true. Sometimes, I think about how easily I could have missed this. How easily I could have drowned out this quiet knowing with noise and distraction. That thought makes me careful. Careful with how I spend my attention. Careful with what I allow into my mind. Because attention shapes reality. And I choose to give my attention to what deepens me, not what empties me. That choice, repeated again and again, reinforces the original one. It becomes a way of living, not just a moment in time. There is also humility in this understanding. I know that I do not control everything. I know that life will continue to surprise me, challenge me, test me. But I also know that this choice does not depend on control. It depends on honesty. And honesty is something I can return to at any moment. No matter how far I wander in thought or emotion, I can always come back to what feels true. That return is always available. As I look ahead, I do not imagine a perfect future. I imagine a real one. A life where moments are fully lived, where emotions are fully felt, where meaning is not sacrificed for speed. I imagine carrying this choice quietly with me, not as a burden but as a guide. Something that reminds me to slow down, to listen, to stay connected to what matters beneath the surface. That is all I need. I understand now that choosing you was not about finding something outside myself. It was about recognizing something within, a value, a truth, a way of being. And once recognized, it could not be unseen. It became part of how I move through the world, part of how I understand myself, part of how I relate to everything else. That integration feels natural, not forced. It feels like coming home to myself. There is no dramatic ending to this story, no final declaration, no moment where everything becomes clear forever. And that is okay. Life is not meant to be wrapped up neatly. It is meant to be experienced continuously. What matters is that I know why I chose you. I feel it in the quiet moments. I recognize it in the calm that remains when everything else falls away. I trust it because it has proven itself not through promises, but through presence. And so I continue, carrying this choice forward, gently, honestly, without needing to explain it to anyone. It lives in the way I think, the way I feel, the way I move through each day. It does not demand attention, but it quietly shapes everything. And that is enough. That is why I chose you. And that is why, even as time passes and life changes, this choice remains steady, rooted, and real. As days turn into weeks and weeks slowly blend into months, I notice how deeply this choice has settled into me. It no longer feels like something I actively think about. It feels like something I live inside. It moves with me through ordinary mornings and quiet nights, through moments of calm and moments of struggle. It does not announce itself. It does not ask to be noticed. Yet it is always there, shaping how I respond to the world, how I understand myself, how I hold space for my own thoughts. This quiet presence has taught me that the most important things in life often arrive without ceremony. They don't interrupt your life loudly. They gently become part of it. There are moments when I catch myself pausing for no clear reason. I might be walking, sitting, or simply breathing, and suddenly there is a stillness inside me. In that stillness, I feel the weight of this choice, not as pressure but as grounding. It reminds me that I am not lost, even when I feel unsure, that I am not empty, even when things feel unfinished. This feeling doesn't solve my problems or erase uncertainty. Instead, it gives me the strength to sit with uncertainty without fear. It shows me that meaning does not come from having all the answers. It comes from knowing what matters, even when answers are missing. I have learned that choosing something deeply meaningful does not protect you from doubt. Doubt still appears, sometimes quietly, sometimes suddenly. It asks questions, challenges assumptions, and tries to pull you in different directions. But doubt no longer feels like an enemy. It feels like part of the process. When doubt arrives, I listen to it without letting it control me. I allow it to speak, but I do not let it rewrite what I already know to be true. Because beneath the questions, beneath the uncertainty, the foundation remains unchanged. You remain unchanged. Sometimes I think about how easy it would be to forget this choice in the rush of daily life, to let routine dull awareness, to let habit replace reflection. That thought keeps me attentive. I don't want this choice to become background noise. I want it to remain alive, not through effort, but through presence. So I slow down when I can. I check in with myself. I ask simple questions, not about where I am going, but about how I am being. Am I listening? Am I honest? Am I still connected to what matters? These questions do not demand immediate answers. They simply keep me aligned. There were times before this choice when I felt like I was constantly adjusting myself to fit the world. Changing direction, changing pace, changing priorities to keep up. It was exhausting, though I didn't always realize it. Now there is less adjustment and more acceptance. I no longer feel the same pressure to mold myself into something else. I feel permission to remain as I am, evolving naturally rather than forcefully. This does not mean I have stopped growing. It means my growth is no longer driven by fear or comparison. It is guided by clarity. I noticed that this choice has changed how I experience silence. Silence no longer feels empty or uncomfortable. It feels full. It feels like space where understanding can breathe. In silence, I am reminded of why I chose you. Because you exist most clearly there, away from noise, away from distraction. In silence, I feel the truth of this choice most strongly. Not as a thought, but as a feeling that settles into my chest and stays. That feeling does not demand action. It simply reminds me that I am connected to something real. There are moments when life presents challenges that feel unfair or confusing. Moments when effort does not lead to clarity, when patience does not lead to answers. In those moments, I don't look for comfort in false certainty. I return to honesty. I accept that not everything will make sense right away. And in that acceptance, I feel less pressure to force meaning where it does not yet exist. This choice has taught me that meaning is not something you create through struggle. It is something you recognize through awareness. I have also noticed how this choice affects how I relate to others. I listen more than I speak. I observe more than I react. I feel less need to convince or persuade, not because I lack opinions, but because I understand that truth does not need defense when it is lived sincerely. I no longer feel threatened by different paths or perspectives. I understand that everyone is choosing something, whether consciously or not. And each choice carries its own weight, its own lessons. Mine simply happens to be this. Sometimes late at night, when everything is quiet, I reflect on the long path that led me here. Not with regret but with understanding. Every misstep, every delay, every moment of confusion played a role. Without them, I might not have recognized clarity when it arrived. Without uncertainty, I might not have valued steadiness. Without noise, I might not have appreciated quiet. This realization fills me with a gentle gratitude. Not for perfection, but for progress. Not for certainty, but for awareness. I no longer feel rushed to define this choice in words. I accept that language has limits. Some things are better felt than explained. I can describe pieces of it, moments of understanding, shifts in perspective. But the full truth of it lies beyond words. It lives in how I show up for my life, in how I respond to difficulty, in how I remain present even when things are unclear. That is where this choice reveals itself most honestly. There is a simplicity in this understanding that I did not expect. I once thought that important choices had to be complex, dramatic, or life-altering in obvious ways. But this one is simple in the best sense. It does not complicate my life. It clarifies it. It does not demand constant attention. It quietly guides it. And that simplicity makes it sustainable. It makes it real. It makes it something I can carry without effort. As time goes on, I feel less attached to outcomes. I care about direction, not destination. I care about alignment, not achievement. This does not mean I have stopped dreaming or planning. It means I am no longer measuring my worth by results. I am measuring it by honesty, by presence, by consistency with what I know to be true. And that shift has changed everything. I understand now that choosing you was not about finding something perfect. It was about finding something authentic. Something that did not need to be polished or improved to be meaningful. Something that could exist as it is, without explanation. That authenticity resonates with me deeply. It reminds me that I do not need to become someone else to live a meaningful life. I simply need to remain connected to what feels true. There are days when nothing special happens. No insight, no realization, no emotional moment. And yet, even on those days I feel a quiet steadiness. A sense that something solid remains beneath the surface. That steadiness is not excitement. It is trust. Trust in the process. Trust in awareness. Trust in the choice I made without pressure or illusion. That trust does not eliminate uncertainty, but it makes it bearable. I also see now that this choice did not isolate me from life. It connected me more deeply to it. I feel moments more fully. I appreciate small details. I notice changes in myself that I might have ignored before. This sensitivity does not overwhelm me. It grounds me. It reminds me that life is not meant to be rushed through. It is meant to be experienced consciously. As I move forward, I do not carry expectations about how this choice should unfold. I allow it to exist as it is. I let it evolve naturally. I remain open to learning, to adjusting, to deepening my understanding. But I do not abandon what I know. I hold it gently without gripping too tightly. That balance feels right. It feels honest. There is a quiet confidence that comes from knowing why you chose something. Not a loud confidence that seeks validation, but a calm one that rests within. I feel that now, not because I am certain about everything, but because I am clear about what matters. That clarity does not shout. It does not demand recognition. It simply remains. And so, this story continues without a clear ending. It unfolds in real time through ordinary moments and quiet reflections. There is no final statement to make, no conclusion to reach. Only a continued presence, a steady awareness, a gentle commitment to what feels true. This is why I chose you. Not because it promised anything, but because it revealed something. And that revelation continues to guide me, quietly, honestly, one moment at a time.